think it is a testament to how honest and how much pride there is in St. Louis. Like, as opposed to, I think some could maybe say that we don't know what's good for us. I disagree. I think that we felt confident because we knew we could tell the story that this was about St. Louis, not about getting something out of St. Louis.
Welcome to a new edition of the City Voice podcast. I'm joined by a very special guest today, Chief Brand Officer Lee Broughton. Lee, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Exceptional attire today. Matt Seebeck said that you were wearing a floral shirt and said it would be remiss of me not to call you out on it. That is an exceptional shirt for a podcast that's on video.
Thank you. I did my best.
Summer is here. Summer is here. Lee, before we get into the podcast, we have a few warm-up questions. They're very serious and you have to answer with honest answers. So the first one, tea or coffee?
Oh, tea.
Tea all the way. We had Jason on here and he threw a curveball at me and he said coffee. Oof. Really let me down. Let me down. Favorite place in St. Louis?
Well, to eat.
To have tea.
To have tea. Right. Probably next to my wife.
That's a very nice answer.
Yeah.
I like that.
Nice.
Most UK thing in your life right now?
We're in it at football.
Lovely. Which Premier League football team do you support?
Oh, Man United.
Do you feel a Man United back?
Getting there.
Your favourite St. Louis spot, and it could be anything, restaurant, park?
Right now, I'd say it's Counterpublic because it's at City Park, it's at Sugarloaf Mound, it's at the Griot, so it can encapsulate quite an interesting area.
Give people the elevator pitch of Counterpublic, because we're going to talk about it a little bit later.
Yeah, so it's essentially a triennial that kicked off on the 15th of April, and it's for 3 months, and it is one of America's largest public art exhibitions, and tells a little bit of the story of St. Louis's history. Very exciting.
We've got a whole section dedicated to that. Favorite band on the planet right now?
Oh, U2. In fact, I just was with Bono in New York.
You're with Bono? Oh my word! Have you got
him and 2,000 of his closest friends? But.
Fantastic. Okay, Lee, we're gonna go through a bit of like how you came to be at this club. So we're gonna start with you first. You are the Chief Brand Officer at St. Louis City SC. Not a lot of people will understand what that means. It's quite a modern job title. Could you explain a little bit about what you do?
Yeah, so I work very closely with Carolyn Kindle and Jason Tyne. But predominantly, I'm more on the kind of the why we exist in the first place, and then ensuring that the brand can really adhere to some of the principles that sit in the reason why we are who we are. So it's more than logos and fonts and all caps in our case, and goes into a lot more of the building around, why the football team was created in the first place to be more than soccer and some of these other things. That's kind of the role that I have.
So you're part of the ownership group. Could you talk to me about your role in the family?
Yeah, so I'm a husband and a dad and a son-in-law. I think probably the most relevant really is the family's imparted so much education and inspiration for the town that they come from and that is now my home. And so I try to do my bit in the family for making St. Louis, the best city in the world.
Fantastic. So let's go right back. That accent is clearly not from the Midwest.
You can hear that?
Oh, I've got that coming through loud and clear. Where did you grow up in England?
So I'm a London boy via Norfolk. I kind of moved here about 20-something years ago from London.
Norfolk, very picturesque place if nobody knows about it.
Yeah, it's kind of, I sometimes say it's like the Missouri of England. It's kind of very agricultural, had a very, sort of storied history. The St. Louis probably is Norwich, which was a very famous city back in its day. But yeah, it was a great place to grow up.
how were you introduced to the beautiful game? Like it tends to differ a little bit in the UK to how it does in the States. Talk me through that.
Yeah, I mean, I can remember that vividly. I was in primary school, and I had a best mate called Ian Thompson, and I went round to his house one day, and stone me if he did not have a bedroom that was just littered in Man United swag. And there was Frank Stapleton and Lou Macari and Norman Whiteside, and he had a bed head that was the Red Devil, and I was like, this is my club. And then I went home and told my dad all about it, and he gave me the history of George Best, who was one of his heroes. So it was kind of sanctioned at home as well.
Sanctioned at home, yeah. I always find it odd when people support different teams to their parents.
Yeah, because I, strictly speaking, should be a Canary boy, Norwich City. And they've also had great, ups and downs, more downs of late. But when I was buying into Man United, I mean, we were rubbish. This was, in the 80s, and we were struggling to stay up. And then some young chap called Alex Ferguson from Aberdeen gets involved, and it's like, oh my goodness, what are we doing? But fortunately, that worked out.
So your formative years were absolute glory years for Man United in the end.
In the end, well, after a lot of patience, and I think probably 3 years before Alex Ferguson really won any real silverware, and then went on to kind of reign for the whole of the current EPL's history. But yeah, when we were Division 1, we weren't very good.
Did you play soccer?
I did actually. Yeah, I was a centre forward and played at school from a kid, and then joined men's teams whilst at school. And I was always quick, but was never an athlete.
What position did you play?
Centre forward.
Centre forward.
Yeah,
lovely.
Goal scorer, glory hunter.
So you're a chief brand officer. That usually comes with some sort of artistic background or artistic passion, and then it transfers into the brand side of thing. What was your artful background?
Well, it was more kind of delusions of grandeur, if I'm honest. I wanted to be a rock star, Pete. Literally started playing the guitar when I saw Eric Clapton once when I was a kid, and I was like, damn, that just looks so amazing. So I taught myself how to play guitar, and then got into bands, and we had loads of gigs in London, and it actually sort of tripped me up for a bit because I kept pushing university off and messed around a bit, but yeah, so I guess I was a musician, although it turns out I wasn't really good, so I had to kind of retool, and this is kind of how that worked.
Do you ever dabble in music now?
Only to listen. I kind of it's funny, when I got to the States, I sort of left that side of me back in London, and I never really picked it up.
Did you go to university in the end?
I did, yeah. Of all things, I read theology.
Theology, very interesting.
Yeah.
Talk to us about that.
Well, it was sort of. I actually had a place at University College London to study architecture, and I was in a band, and I pushed it off, as I said, and I was sort of really wanting to do music and front a band more. And I was realizing that architecture is seriously difficult.
It's a long time.
You have 7 years of study. I mean, it's like basically a med student without the guaranteed work at the end of it. So I realized that perhaps I'm not going to be disciplined enough to be able to do that, and decided that what could really help me with songwriting, and then what could put some sort of an intellectual basis to my faith. And that's when I said, you know what, I'm going to try theology.
So you go rock star, theology, you exit university late. What's the next? It doesn't feel like there's a logical next step. Like what did you do next?
It's really interesting because I don't know about you, but there are often moments that you reflect back on and realize that actually these things were really intriguingly timed. And so I've always had a job, always tried to have a little bit of money in my pocket. Ever since I was 14 years old, all the way through university, I worked. And towards the end, as I graduated, I was actually working as a kind of a duty manager at a health and fitness club. And as I was coming to an end of my university and I was going to start needing work, there was an opening in the membership department. And I thought, well, I'm going to take it and I'll figure out what I'm going to do after that. And I got the job in the membership department, and they started teaching me about this idea of retention and acquisition of members. And lo and behold, that was marketing. So I sort of like, oh, this is quite interesting. So then I went to graduate school and started looking at that, and so there was never really that kind of real aha moment, particularly, other than it was just sort of an involved process.
Was like to think that the City Voice podcast like inspires people in their sort of everyday lives. A lot of people make attempts at something that they think will work, and then they end up falling behind where their peers are. You exited university late, and then you entered the business world. What was the biggest learning about that, and how did you deal with that kind of like, a little bit of adversity in that space?
Yeah, you know what? I actually really had a chip on my shoulder for a while, because I did realize that I was a lot older than my peers, and I needed to really put my head down and catch up. So I did operate in that, really hurry up mentality for a while. And that came with its both its opportunities, but also you have to be a bit careful of that. I actually think that if I were to sort of try to sum up that kind of moment, the biggest kind of idea, if you like, that impacted me was this notion about time and timing. And there's a famous quote that those on my team have heard me say, which is that there's only one thing more powerful than all the armies in the world, and that's an idea whose time has come, which I think is fabulous. And knowing that you've got a great idea, but then having to work for the timing of it is really important discipline, and it's very powerful, because if you've got an idea and you've got the right time, it's pretty amazing. And I think this is a great testimony to that.
100%, and we'll definitely get into that. But before we get there, how did you end up in St. Louis?
Yeah, so I mean, again, crazy. It's timing, really, in so many ways. I decided that I didn't want to be in a health and fitness club. I wanted to be in a consultancy, and so during the course of my postgrad work, I had spent time shopping different consulting practices in marketing, and came across one that was prepared to offer an overqualified and too old graduate trainee program. And they had just landed a fledgling car rental company called Enterprise. And, they basically said to me, well, you're brand new and this is brand new. Well, you better enjoy yourselves. And I actually got very fortunate to work right at the beginning. It's probably about 1996, 97. When the UK was just beginning to understand what the market for car rental in the insurance replacement sort of area was, because of Enterprise, and they needed help positioning it. So that's how I stumbled across Enterprise. From there, I sort of fell in love with the company, and a few years later and a few stories later, I managed to get a job to be their first European marketing manager. But that meant indoctrination in the US first. So in 2002 or 3 or whenever it was, I got posted here for 2 years, which was the first time I'd ever been to America. And I actually thought St. Louis was a suburb of Chicago, if you can believe it. That's how
less internet back then. Less good version of the internet.
No. It was all those things. I bought the Lonely Planet guide for Chicago, thinking that's where I'd be hanging out.
Tell us a bit about, you've fallen in love with St. Louis. Talk about STL Made.
Yeah, so it's really interesting. I actually think, you're working in a global company that it's very busy. It requires tremendous commitment. I realized that I was staying in St. Louis when I left, and then I started living in St. Louis. And living in St. Louis, I started seeing things that I hadn't really noticed and I hadn't really appreciated. And then someone asked me to help them think through how we could tell a story that would represent St. Louis. And I'd never thought about place branding. I hadn't thought really that there was an opportunity to brand a place. But of course there is, and obviously it's a big industry, but it just hadn't ever something that hadn't crossed my mind. So I set about working with them and a team to try and understand what that was. And in the research, we discover just all these incredible makers, doers, thinkers, creators in St. Louis that are all crafting and engineering and thinking their way for a better future for the region. But somehow we weren't organized in being together, and we weren't recognizing one another as well as we thought we could. So that's when we set up this idea of a movement called STL Made. There's a dedicated website called thestl.com, and now it's full of stories of these people doing amazing things for the community.
Do you think that the STL Made is it feels like it's St. Louis it's a pride point? Right?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I mean, one of the amazing kind of things that dawned on me was having spent what by then was, 15, 16 years in St. Louis before I began it. I had adopted a psychology here that is very real, where you sort of learn to be a bit, what's that word when you're when the opposite of introvert, a bit introverted about where you are, where you're from.
Right.
And you feel very proud about it, and you feel very proud about your neighborhood. But if somebody was to ask you, you sort of tend to cage how you speak it. Businesses write on their address the neighborhood that they're in as opposed to from St. Louis. And there's this whole sort of strange inferiority complex that you kind of take on. And it was really interesting to realize that was something there, and it was something for us to address as a community. And that's really what we began to do, because we are actually united in a sense of pride of our neighborhoods, and we all have it. Doesn't matter where you're from. As opposed to what the research sort of showed was there's a little bit of uniting around disappointment in St. Louis as opposed to positivity. And so we really began to try and infect that for the good. And I think the movement, the fact that it's come out quite well now in STL Made is something that people are seeing as a mark of pride. And it isn't about whether you were born there; it's about whether you've made it your home. And so it's been really fun to see.
STL Made, you've already talked about it, has a research arm. One of the best marketing, I've worked in advertising for, 15 years, and we always think we've got an insight, but they're never that interesting. Or they're always quite obvious. But when we were talking, and, full disclosure here, Lee brought me to St. Louis, and one of the insights that he shared to me about St. Louis and perception was fascinating. I'd love you to talk us through how STL Made research informed the idea of this.
Yeah, so it was a really fascinating project, and again, you weren't a futurist. You didn't know what you were going to stumble on, but we really knew that we needed to better understand what perceptions were within St. Louis about St. Louis, and then what the perception was in America about St. Louis, and it was sort of a bit frowned on, if I'm brutally honest, because the perception of St. Louis within St. Louis is so great that there was an assumption that we already knew what America thought. And so we went in a little gingerly, and we set up quality, kind of groups, and had lots of sit downs and conversations, and we filmed them, and we spent time in New York or in Des Moines or in Minneapolis or wherever we were. So we had sort of big cities, smaller cities, similar size cities, and then we obviously did it in St. Louis too. The amazing thing was this this idea that within St. Louis the perception is that it's very negative towards St. Louis. The fascinating thing outside is there's no perception at all. when we would spend time asking them whether they'd heard of St. Louis, whether they could place St. Louis, whether they knew what was the first thing that came to mind with St. Louis, all these ideas that you've got, and there were groups of people being able to have conversation. It wasn't just a quantitative study; it was literally a qual. And it was very clear that people don't think about St. Louis, and therefore, when asked, they're like, I don't know. She said, where is it? And then you ask them to put it on the map, and we had it all over the place. And we were talking to people that were they ran the gamut. It wasn't just a particular set of demographics that we were dealing with. And I think for us, and as a brand person, which you will attest to as well, that was a huge opportunity for us.
So explain why is it a win that nobody's got an opinion? Why is that a win?
Yeah, because there is in the going in, there would be nothing more daunting than having to change a perception that was not good of something to such a massive audience. That would be the single hardest job, I would say, that an advertising brand person could possibly do. Going in when there is literally no perception, there is neutrality at worst, you suddenly have the power to project whatever idea you want to project about St. Louis. And that's what we wanted to do. We first of all decided that, we all need to get on the same page as a community ourselves. So it was very internally focused. And then we wanted to be able to start looking at where the proof points were for a story that we would then project to America about what is happening here, because we know it's fantastic. And, it's sort of got a social dynamic, but it's also got an economic dynamic to it as well. And I think it was a brilliant thing to work on. And I think this is a fantastic proof point of some of its outcome.
So you've got the insight, you're excited because it's an easier job to create an opinion than change one.
Yeah. How
did the idea for a soccer club come about? Because when you sat down and told me about it, it's like, what? What's going on here? So tell me, how did that happen, and what was the rationale?
Yeah, so I mean, that you've got to come back to the Taylor family and the fact that in one of the meetings that we had, there had been a lot of work and a lot of time commitment given, particularly for Carolyn and for Andy, in the finishing of the Gateway Arch project, and that had completed. The STL Made work was the research was done, and the project was out there and happening, and Andy sort of had us all fall off our chairs with this idea of what it might be to have a soccer club here. And once we'd picked ourselves up and sort of dusted ourselves off a little bit, and
because he said he would never do it, he would never own a sport.
I've even heard that with my own ears, so that was that's even been said in my time. But I think just the testament to the commitment that he and the family have got to St. Louis. But the research showed that there was opportunity for big proof points about what we want our future to be. And what better example than the number one sport in the world, a city that wants to have international ambitions. A lot of the immigrants that are coming in to many of the jobs that sit around industry specialisms that St. Louis has are coming from countries where soccer is their passion. So there was a lot of stuff that made sense, and then the inclusivity around this sport and the accessibility around this sport, it seemed to all fit so many different things. So we sort of eventually got on board and then got to work.
And I'm not sure if too many of the fans listening to this know that the demographic split of MLS and the age compared to other sports. I think the average age of a viewer is around 38. There's not a dominant race that watches it. It's the audience looks like America.
Yeah, it really does. I mean, I can remember vividly stacking up, and the MLS is a slide that they've developed with research agencies looking at their demographics, that they are growing exponentially quicker with the 18 to 35-year-old than any of the other sports. And a lot of the diverse communities really gravitate towards MLS2. So, the future does seem to look really, really exciting for soccer in America, even though I know we feel like we've been saying that for a long time. It does, again, go back to timing. I think the timing is really interesting right now.
You get a club signed off. We've had Jason on, Chief Operating Officer, and he spoke about like building out the infrastructure of the club. I'd love to hear, there's a club, you've got no crest, you've got no name, but you've just won a franchise. Where do you start when it comes to building something that does not exist?
Yeah, interesting. I mean, we really spent a lot of time beating up a vision, and that vision had to be lofty and ambitious, because otherwise, what's the point? It had to be more than the game. It had to be something that the game was a reason for all this other stuff. So bigger than sport. And once we felt as a family that was sort of on message, on point, the purpose of that felt really, really good. We then just simply got down to sort of dividing up roles and execution. I mean, Carolyn has come into her own, as we've all seen, as the face of the franchise. And, it's fascinating that the majority female owned. It's just taken on a life of its own. Jason is sort of like a secret weapon in a way, because he's been able to get involved in so many different things. I mean, he's a recovering lawyer, self-proclaimed, but did a lot of the legal and finance and operations stuff. And then I think, a lot of my interests and were sort of on the brand building and stadium design with Carolyn, and so we sort of divided and conquered, and recruited. The most important thing is to find people that are far better than you and get out of their way. Andy taught me that, and so it's about surrounding yourself with great people. So we've been very lucky in that regard.
And the family are very serious business people, one of the most successful business families in American history. The numbers in soccer don't stack up. Like, if you're going to invest the money that's been invested into anything, like, the returns of soccer don't really make sense to a very business-orientated family. What's the thinking behind investing in something like this, knowing that returns are very far out?
Yeah, I mean, that is really the kind of extraordinary situation of City SC. I mean, the family are building this for 100 years and longer. It's not for a 5-year exit, and so this is a gift to St. Louis. I mean, there is no two ways about it. Yes, it is not a 501c3, but it is. The return on investment is a societal community benefit, and it's going to be a destination that can launch so many other things too. I mean, we've already seen billions of dollars of development in around City Park since we broke ground, and that's housing and restaurants and amenities and hotels. It was an extraordinary thing that and it's private money too. It's not public money. I mean, that's, again, little is spoken about that. Yes, there's a very small percentage of tax on incremental sales that are here, but there is no public money here. And so the Taylors wanted to be able to build a legacy versus buy one, and that is what we're doing.
Does it hearten you that people in the media have started to write about downtown with glowing positivity? And do you think that the success so far, and we're short way into this,
Yeah.
but people turn up early,
Yeah.
people stay late, and people have a great time downtown. Do you think that that's going to start to shift business owners' perceptions about where to set up their businesses, their restaurants, their pubs, their bars?
I really hope so. I mean, look at the Tony Messenger article just a couple of days ago. I thought it was a fabulous interpretation of he and his wife coming down on a Tuesday night to see City play Omaha, which isn't even in the MLS. This was a cup game. It was a midweek game. The stadium was completely sold out. There was a festival experience all the way around here with 25,000 people. There was a Lizzo concert happening just around the corner. I mean, we were buzzing. People were walking around. I really think that we've got an opportunity here to sort of see the beginning of something very, very positive. And again, it's about our futures as opposed to a sense of looking back to our past.
As part of the build up, I mean, you get the sign off, but there are a lot of opinions about what's going to happen because St. Louis has been burned by sports franchises in the past. How did you get buy-in from the community? Because some people will look at what happens on game day and be like, that magic just happens, but it hasn't been an easy path. Talk to me about some of the hurdles that you had to overcome to get where we are today.
Yeah, I mean, that's a fascinating part of the story too. And when I sort of think about it, looking back, because it was only a year or two after St. Louis said no to a franchise coming here for soccer,
which must have been a painful decision for a city that loves soccer as much as this one, right?
I think it is a testament to how honest and how much pride there is in St. Louis, like as opposed to I think some could maybe say that we don't know what's good for us. I disagree. I think that we felt confident because we knew we could tell the story that this was about St. Louis, not about getting something out of St. Louis. And I think that's probably where the reticence of the first thing came from. Everybody. I think back in those days, only Jim Kavanagh was the local owner, and the other owner or two were from out of town. Now it was an entirely local ownership group. Jim was, he's been fantastic the whole way through. Right at the time, Carolyn and I spent quite a lot of time with him in Worldwide, making sure we'd done our research as to what went on. And Carolyn's got a community background. I had done that STL Made work. So we felt like we got the pulse a little bit. And, you don't go in overconfident, but you go in to really speak to the purpose behind it. And that felt like the only way we could have done it.
You have to create a proposal. You've got nothing. How daunting is it going into oh wow, how many things? How do you even what does the war room look like for a new MLS club?
Well, that's I mean, first of all, I go back to Jason Tyne.
Yeah.
He was instrumental in assembling the kind of team and the organization that sat around the specificity of the proposal itself. I mean, that is 1,000 or 2,000 pages long. I mean, that's a burden, let me tell you. I helped organize all of the brand, sort of vision there, and Carolyn played a huge role in getting the community on board. And so I felt like we were in a good spot. There was one time when we went up to New York and we were in there, and Andy sort of, he said something along the lines of, "We do what we say we're going to do." And that was a very powerful moment for Don Garber to hear. And Jason and I sort of looked at each other and we're like, "Oh my God, we got to do this." But it was if you know exactly how difficult it is, but ahead of time, you probably don't go into it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So what were the defining principles of the club? Like, how did you come to those? Because like we talk about bigger than soccer
Yeah.
a lot. What does that mean, and where did it stem from?
I think that it's sort of a big legacy of who the Taylors are. If I'm honest, I mean it's a lot about giving back and thanking a community that has enabled enterprise and supported enterprise over the many decades to become the thing that it is. I think that it's a real sense of pride in home and in St. Louis. I mean, the fact is that the Taylors have never ever given any credence to leaving St. Louis. They've only ever doubled down in being here. And so that speaks volumes to those of us that either work for them or have been fortunate enough to get to know them closely, and it rubs off. And then I think that again, it's sort of trying to find where the gaps are that need to get filled and put hope and create a convention around what we want our futures to look like. And this sort of has been a wonderful way to inspire and to kind of see a whole different community of fans. I mean, the crossover of sports fans in the stadium. I think someone told us on the analytics side that only 10% of the fan base that sit in the stadium have had season tickets at other sports teams in St. Louis. So it's a new group of fans that are here, and they're all chanting STL. I mean, it's a brilliant thing to see.
How confident were you that you were going to win the bid?
Well, I'll tell you when it turned, because you never say no problem. There was a time when Andy called a lunch meeting of the business community, and he called them to lunch with about a 10-day notice, and it was his peers. So first of all, 10 days is like for you and me in half an hour for people that are that important, that busy. And it was just a very short email. Andy is famously brief with his emails. Some might say abrupt. And he shot them out an email, and he wanted to convene a lunch because Don Garber was coming to visit, doing a tour of the site, et cetera, and we wanted to welcome him. The big goal here was Don was skeptical that St. Louis had a business community that could support a third professional sports team, and he'd just been burned. So very different to the research that we've just talked about, where America doesn't really know what St. Louis is and has a neutral perception. In this instance, Don had a negative perception because he just got burned, and he put a lot of stake in there. So we're at this lunch, and there's probably 30 very senior executives, including both the Cardinals and the Blues ownership.
Oh, wow.
And they were all demonstrating, I think combined employee hires that sat around the table were over 1 million. And they all basically said, we are committed. And at the time, we hadn't begun to talk about sponsorship. We hadn't even got designs for the stadium. This was all about the commitment that we wanted to bring it. And I think that really changed Don's mind. In fact, I've heard since that it's become a requirement of Don to have that experience in other cities. He was so sort of bowled away by it. So that was when I realized, hang on, we're onto something here.
So decision lands. Where are you? What are the feelings?
Yeah, so we get the phone call around about the 17th, 18th of August, which was pretty surreal, where it became really something that we could all celebrate and enjoy was at the pub downtown in the Grove, and we invited the community to come and hear an announcement. And people kind of, I think people figured out what it was going to be, but they were lined all the way out the door down Manchester. and we were all sat up in the rafters of this pub, and there were thousands and thousands. I mean, it was thousands of people, and they were all chanting their STL, and they were chanting Carolyn's name, and it was brilliant buzz. And I think some of the MLS were there too. They were like, "What in the heck?" And they all had MLS for the loose scarves, because at the time we didn't have a brand. That was a good moment.
So the franchise is secure. How do you go about naming? Like, because there's not a through thread of names in MLS, right? And there's lots of sort of different ways to go about it. How did you land on City?
I have to say, as an Englishman, I was nervous of the naming, because there are some unusual names for sports teams in America. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking that football, as you and I know it, it's really about your place. It's about place identity. It's your tribe. So I wasn't actually sure where this was going to go. I had my hope, and what we decided is, let's ask St. Louis. So we figured out how to get out on a website a submission of names, and we had thousands and thousands of responses. I mean, I don't know how many thousand, maybe 10,000 responses, a lot. And there were some fairly hilarious things, but by far and away, the absolute top names were either City or United, and everything had St. Louis in it, and some abbreviated it, but for the most for almost entirely the most part, it was St. Louis City or St. Louis United, and we weren't allowed to have United. That was something that we'd been told by the MLS, that there were already too many United, so we didn't. That wasn't even an option to consider. So for us, when you took that out, there was such a clear number one, and it was actually, St. Louis had done the naming convention for us, so it actually became quite easy.
Quite interesting. United City, is where everybody went with this.
It is interesting. Yeah, I think there's something really profound in that, actually.
So all caps, controversial, very controversial.
The press love it.
Yeah, people don't understand it. Actually, people do understand
they
it.
Do.
Mastermind came in and spoke to us, and he immediately got it. Tell us about that decision and how it came about.
I mean, I think that it's really trying to underscore a psychology of positivity and a psychology of there is literally zero reticence. It is only swagger. Mm-hmm. We are completely confident in where we come from and our city, and the All Caps does a wonderful job of figuratively displaying that.
That's really interesting. That's exciting. I love it. I'm an all caps kind of guy. So you don't have any players. You don't have a training ground. There's just a pile of rubble down here, and there's a long runway in. I mean, the runway actually extended out. How do you go about like building the brand? Like, what are the steps if somebody else wanted to create a soccer club?
Yeah, I think that one of the things that again, as weird timing has it, because of the shutdown that we all experienced with COVID-19, it ended up being something that we were able to use to our advantage. At first, we were terrified, as if everybody was, but then the implications were horrifying too. I mean, when you're starting to have calls where we're not sure that the regulations will allow us to open up at 22,500 seats because of social distancing, mm-hmm. that we're going to have to rip out every third seat or something, So there were kind of existential moments for sure, but that extra window of time not only ensured that the stadium would be able to be finished, which, there have been so many examples of expansion teams that have had to have the first half of their season on the road because they're still trying to figure out how to get home built. We really didn't want that. And it would have been our experience if it would have forced us into 2022 because it was so disruptive to construction. That extra year also gave us an enormous amount of time to organize our brand, and the club was able to define itself rather than it be while it was playing. we were able to really get to know our fans. And we spent a lot of time in community engagement. We spent a lot of time getting to know influencers, getting to know the supporter section, spending time with prospective sponsors. I mean, there was a lot of effort being able to be given over to explaining the vision, telling the story, putting out content and activity and retail that would be exemplary of what we're saying this is going to be. By the time the football finally came, everybody had a really good sense of what it is they were going to see. And then the players blew everybody out of the water with just how amazing they are.
What are the pillars? What are the pillars of the club? Do you have like a fundamental foundation?
Yeah, so we have five sort of guiding values, if you like. It's almost like a lens that we look at the world through. And the first one is tenacity. And again, I think you can see
it out
that
on the pitch, right?
Exactly. Yeah, you can see that in the style of play and in all sorts of ways. Then we have progressive as an idea, and that's really about the forward-thinking, technology-inspired fan experience that we really want to create. Then you have ambition, and again, I think we've talked about that a little bit too. Like, we never really wanted to have a mild point of view or just be an okay club. Like, we wanted lofty, very kind of high achieving vision for what we thought City could be. So that was super important. Optimism is another one, and that really stems from that idea of ensuring that we are incredibly proud of where we come from and what we bring to the table as an organization. And then the last one is about an attitude, and it's one that we call swagger. And it's been funny to hear and sort of see how that's been embraced, because I think that we wanted to challenge this idea that it's okay to be bold and confident in what we say and what we believe. And you don't have to be arrogant or conceited when you're doing those things. In fact, you can be very humble in your tone, but you can be very, you can have swagger. And I think that you see that in our colors, you see that in our architecture, and you see that in a lot of the style of our play as well.
Okay, so swagger. Let's talk about swagger, because that's the only way to describe City Red.
Yeah.
The color of our home kit. That is a bold decision. It's a very unique color, but not everybody knows how we got there and the symbolism behind that color.
Yeah, so another great story. So I personally think the St. Louis flag is a fantastic design, fantastic flag. And we used that as our inspiration. But what we wanted to do is put a contemporary angle on it. And so we looked very carefully at the three colors that are the predominant colors in the flag other than white. And for us, we thought about the red spectrum, and some of the kind of guidelines were that for the primary kit, it had to be a dark color. And we did not want to be a Cardinals red for obvious reasons. We didn't want to be a St. Louis flag red. We wanted to kind of inject that with some contemporary youthfulness and energy. And so it sort of drew us closer to that pink hue spectrum. And as it turns out, the Pantone color 1925 is the very furthest on the red spectrum before it turns pink and therefore goes light. It also happens to be a color, pink is Carolyn's favorite color. So don't tell her that it's not pink, but it was sort of like a great opportunity there.
Were you nervous before that kit launch? How are people going to receive this? Because people were speculating what the colour was going to be.
They were.
They're like, is it going to be blue? And a few in the marketing team were a little bit nervous about how it would be received.
Yeah, I mean, there is a bit. You are always a little nervous of how I mean, especially when you are so close to something, and you're like, oh my goodness, have we done enough to, temperature check this, and is it going to be considered a bit too flamboyant or something that isn't wearable? So there was a bit of nerves, but I feel like there was a lot about it that was able to demonstrate a differentiation, right? There's no other color like it in the league. Our crest stands out from that whole spectrum of crests that's there. So I felt like if we could show the pride that there is in the brightness and the energy of it, then I think people will get it. And I think people have just like completely got on board with it. It's really exciting.
There are thousands of football clubs, soccer clubs all around the world. Standing out is difficult. And I think we have stood out, with reading what outside voices say about the club. What do you think makes this club stand out, and what are you most proud of from that perspective? Because differentiating a soccer club, everybody's got a pitch, everybody's got a stadium, everybody's got a kit.
Yeah. I mean, I think it comes back to understanding where you're from. I mean, where you and I grew up, football's 150 years old plus, and it literally was when a village would play another village, and that's kind of how they met. And it was how you distinguished where you were from. And I really wanted to make sure that our soccer club was rooted in its place. And that's how you can be differentiated. I mean, if we were to try and think of ourselves as another sports team, I think you can get into some difficulties with accidentally duplicating a color or over deconstructing a thematic, or bumping into some of the controversy of marks. I think we're so lucky in St. Louis. First of all, we have an iconic geographical piece of art that is also extraordinary science in the arch that any city would wish they had. Then we have the reason that we are existing at all, which is the confluence of the Mississippi and the Missouri. I mean, how could you not have these most fundamental things about who we are and where we're from be somehow in relationship to what the club's all about? And then after that, it's about the people, and the people here are the thing that sets St. Louis apart, I think. So we didn't actually fear that as much as you'd think you would when you're in the sea of how many sports teams and how many brands and logos and all the rest of it there are. For us, that felt quite a natural place to evolve from, because we were starting from that position.
So this beautiful stadium, the decision was made to put it downtown. It's not out in the suburbs. It's not anywhere else. That was a big decision as well. There were some people that had thoughts about that. Why do you think downtown needed this soccer stadium? What was the...
I mean, again, this is about our future. And in order for us to be able to convene around that idea together as a community, we have to have a strong city. It is completely purposeless to try and make another neighborhood in the region attempt to be something more than St. Louis. So for us, there was not a choice. It wasn't a difficult decision. It has to be downtown. And then I think that we had the extraordinary benefit of having HOK from St. Louis, who have got a very strong sports practice. So that was a great sounding board for us to begin conversations about how were we going to have this thing, sort of designed and be in the neighborhood. And then we did kind of create some extra spice for them by inviting Julie Snow of Snow Krylik, who's actually based in Minneapolis, but she is a real star urban design thinker, and is highly decorated, very well considered. She came on board as well. And I think as a design group, we were able to really get into a lot of what it meant to be in a neighborhood, what it meant to be a good neighbor. One of our missions is, exceptional club and neighbor. And, that was important to us.
What are the fundamentals the ownership group wanted as part of the stadium? Is there like these are the three must-haves with the architects?
I think at the design level, so obviously functionality is fundamental.
Yeah.
So if we're thinking about form, we wanted something that was invitational to everybody, hence all four corners are open, and at no point are you walking around the stadium and you can't see in. We did not want exclusivity or elitism. We wanted it to not block out the sun and feel like it was something that had just sort of descended on this part of downtown, but it feels like it's really built into the neighborhood. We wanted it to be loud and proud, and the canopy plays a huge role in how that comes across, and I think people have been really amazed at just how wonderful St. Louis sounds when they're together chanting STL. So and then I think that it was about experience, wanting to make sure that our experience here was second to none. We actually created some design pillars for them, and the idea of experience and mobility and connectivity were three of these things. I mean, we loved what the O'Loughlin's have done with Union Station, and we wanted to draft off of the energy to sort of just take it across to Olive and beyond, and really feel like this was a part of momentum, and how can architecture play that role. And then Great Rivers Greenway and the Brick Line was coming through here. So I mean, there's a lot of partnership and participation. It isn't just a single sort of isolated thing, and it's a question of figuring out how to fit in that flow and make it feel natural for St. Louisans.
Building things is difficult.
Yes.
A lot can go wrong.
Yes.
Is there a challenge that fans might not know about that kept you up for a few weeks?
I mean, have you heard the one about the spring yet?
No.
Okay. Good grief. So there was a time, probably 2 years ago, around about now, where we discovered a natural spring right in the middle of where the pitch is supposed to be. And it was pumping out, probably 55 gallons of water a minute. And the construction team had figured out how to have a generator that would siphon it off. But the longer the building construction would go, and the closer we came to having to complete the pitch and the stadium itself, we were having to make decisions about this spring. And then, in classic St. Louis fashion, the heavens open and there's just catastrophic rainfall in a short period of time. And that 50 gallons turns into, like, at one point, 1,000 gallons a minute. And you're realizing that we're having to create a huge reservoir that sits underneath the stadium, and that is able to clean the water, and then find a very environmentally and functionally helpful way of getting that water back into the MSD system. And so a lot of collaboration with the city, a lot of collaboration with MSD, an absolute boatload of money and lost time. But yes, that is, it's somewhere in our stadium, and I'm not going to tell you where. There is a giant spring and a cavernous area of reservoir that helps us manage that water.
Wow. Carolyn always says, out of adversity, St. Louis City SC always comes out stronger. And there's been some adversity. One of the opportunities was the stadium name. Round 2, City Park was the chosen one. I don't think anybody at the club is as excited about the name City Park as you. What does City Park mean to you, and how was the decision landed on to get there?
Yeah, that I think you're right. I think Carolyn's right. So we really wanted to create something that was a destination, not just a football stadium 17, 20 times a year. This district and the things that are happening on it are about placemaking. And so for me, when that situation sort of became something we had to deal with, we wanted to really double down on the idea of placemaking. And, City Park feels invitational. It feels common. Another great name for the area could be something like City Commons. It's that sort of, it gives an edge. It gives I think about, I don't know, some of the cities that I've either lived in or been to, like Soho or Tribeca, or you get these interesting evolutions of certain roads and certain junctures. And for me, City Park feels like one of those. It could be a neighborhood. St. Louis loves its neighborhoods, but it's about placemaking, and that's what I think we really enjoy from it. And I think, discovering Mill Creek Valley and working with Great Rivers Greenway, who introduced us to Damon, and the incredible work that he's doing to help us memorialize and commemorate the neighborhood that used to be here before any of our, any of us were. That just adds to the placemaking too, because it's sort of holding memory really carefully. People can come and sit in the landscape and hang out. I think that's pretty unusual for a soccer club to be able to have all that in.
I mean, walkable cities is a bit of a hot topic amongst people at the moment,
Yeah.
like for mental health reasons,
Right.
Community reasons. Do you envisage a future where downtown does become more of a walkable city? Like, is City Park the opportunity and like the seed of how that could spread throughout St. Louis?
Yeah, I really think it is. I really think it can be, and I really hope that we can organize as a city to make that happen. I mean, the Brick Line is a fantastic example of that seed beginning to show a sapling, right? And then you think about what City Park represents. As I was saying, we're sort of bringing a flow of people from Union Station who it was difficult to cross Market Street before City Park was there. Now it's super easy, and you come flowing across and you cut through an entire block, get over to Schlafly, and you get across Olive. There aren't too many more things, and there's a lot of effort by a lot of different people right now to continue this momentum, and that's what's so exciting. I mean, there are lots of people working on trying to figure out how we can make it walkable.
You get to meet a lot of sports clubs owners, a lot of very successful business people that pass through this complex, whatever you want to call it. Are they excited about the opportunities here? Do you think the opportunity to change the perception of St. Louis is, number one, is it happening? And number two, are conversations happening about this is a good opportunity? There's lots of beautiful architecture around here, 3 incredible sports clubs within walking distance of each other. Is progress starting to happen?
No question. I think you just look at the last couple of months of press coverage that St. Louis is getting, whether it's because of preseason for the Cardinals or whether it's the start of our inaugural season that garnered an enormous amount of press coverage all around the world, whether it's Counterpublic, which we can talk about. I mean, we were in international press twice once for St. Louis City and once for Counterpublic last weekend, one in London. My brother forwarded me the article from The Guardian and said, look at this. And it was, João Klaus was on the front of the photograph, and it was a brilliant interview with Lutz and Bradley. And then Forbes did this incredible article all about the Counterpublic public art exhibition. So yeah, I think the press are seeing and hearing that there is a party going on in St. Louis, and we better figure out how to get there. And I think leaders are really seeing it too.
How do you hold yourself accountable? Not you personally. How does the ownership group hold themselves accountable to the promises that were laid down? Is there like a measurement structure? Do you have any plans to really look at impact that isn't so easy to see? Like what does
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, first of all, the number one kind of accountability measure is the fact that we live here, and we will remain living here, and so we're neighbors. And then I think that there are things that we're doing that can sort of talk to some of that. I mean, St. Louis City SC has a brand tracker that is in the marketplace, and we pull it out twice a year, and we've done it now twice.
What are you looking for in a brand tracker?
We're looking about things like sentiment, and we're looking at it across multiple audiences. We're looking at, awareness. I mean, predominantly it's about engagement, though. What do they think? What do people think about your brand? Are certain things resonating? Is pride a thing? That type of thing. But St. Louis, through Greater St. Louis Inc., is also got a sentiment tracker in market, and it's in market all the time, and they pull it out twice a year too. Slightly different reasons, and they're looking at a much broader kind of sentiment, if you like, across the community for a number of different reasons in lots of different facets. But I mean, we also hear that readout, and lots of us are involved in that. I mean, the sports teams, but the businesses that sit within the membership of Greater St. Louis Inc. So the accountability is something that we're all incredibly aware of and know is important. And I think a lot of it is about making sure that we stay here and we keep listening. And it's about projecting this idea of what we want to be.
Part of the St. Louis Renaissance is there are lots of different projects happening all at the same time. When I think about what is happening in St. Louis, I like the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And this is just one piece of it.
Yep.
But there are lots of other things going on, and people don't always connect them coming together. But something special is happening in St. Louis, and something that a lot of people will have seen is these beautiful adverts in black and yellow for something called Counterpublic. Mm-hmm. So you are working on Counterpublic, art, community, like all of the things that go into making a successful soccer team are present here. Why should people be excited about an art festival spanning 3 months? Coming to, it's 3 months?
3 months, yeah.
3 months.
Every 3 years.
I mean, massively ambitious.
Yeah.
Talk to us about how this project came about. How do people see it?
Yeah, so one of the things that I don't think everybody necessarily understands is that there are about 12 million visitors to St. Louis for arts and culture a year already, which is more than any of the sports teams put together.
Wow.
And it probably brings about $600 million of economic impact today. And Counterpublic is this idea of a public civic exhibition that literally threads a needle around all of our phenomenal arts and culture institutions for 3 months and make St. Louis the epicenter of arts in America. And right now it's on. Right now we have had extraordinary press, and it's been really, really fun to see. And St. Louis is getting an enormous amount of plaudits for the thinking, the kind of innovative approach to art in public space. And it is, again, placemaking. And in this instance, the theme of it is about time and how we hold time as a community. And Counterpublic spent a year in engagement we had nearly 1,000 conversations up and down the whole of Jefferson Avenue, and that's the stretch that the art exhibition is on, 6 miles of Jefferson Avenue. And that really informed us about stories that have never been told, had been forgotten or hidden, and gave us an opportunity to really celebrate some of these things and have an accurate understanding of the history that's taken place here, with the sole purpose of being able to then convene ideas and points of view, no matter who you are, about what we want our futures to be like. And the belief is that you know, we can't talk about our future until we've understood some of our history. And you know, history is complicated and it's challenging, but it's super important to remember it. And we believe that remembering is something that's both individual and communal, and it's culture enriching. So, you know, that's why, and so does CITY SC. I mean, the family and CITY SC literally made possible Pillars of the Valley.
So Pillars of the Valley, so fans can actually experience a Counterpublic piece here. Tell us where Pillars of the Valley is in the stadium, and like how did that come about?
Yeah, so on the southwest corner of the stadium, right on Market Street, thousands of people every other week literally come through Pillars of the Valley to get into their gate, the Worldwide Technology Gate, and it's an incredible thing to be able to see. How it came about was Great Rivers Greenway were doing this incredible work in the community, trying to imagine the brick line. And, you know, a fundamental part of their vision for the brick line is stitching our neighborhoods together in the city through a pedway, bike, walkable kind of path. And during the course of that engagement, there was the revealing of a community that used to be here called Mill Creek Valley. And artists were a part of the community engagement process and were commissioned, in this case Damon specifically, to come up with a way to express through art what a memorial could look like. And I got to hear about this, and so did Carolyn and Jason. And we really felt that it was a profound opportunity for us who, you know, what we learned in that process was the stadium sits on the eastern end of Mill Creek Valley. So it was an opportunity for us to put it inside the footprint that we owned. And it literally sits at the very beginning of the brick line. So it's such a cool thing. And during Counterpublic, Damon was able to produce a film with an Oscar-winning director that told more of its story. And there are 29 other pieces of art that sit up and down Jefferson Avenue that are doing similar things to Damon's Pillars.
It is quite beautiful any time of day.
Yeah.
Any day of the week.
Yep.
There were always people there looking at it and experiencing it.
Super
Does that? Did you expect that?
Yeah, I think we did. I think we, you know, it's fascinating learning about history. It's fascinating, you know, even though we recognize it's tough, but it's so important that we know it and that we teach it and that we keep holding it carefully. And then there's just the beauty of the statues or the pillars that Damon has you know, kind of imagined in place, and it really I think is a great experience.
Football, because I'm sitting with an Englishman and I keep on saying football. I thought I'd got that out of the system. Soccer and art has seemed like a bit of an odd combination, but as football develops as a global game and more people get interested in it, it's starting to become a bit of a through thread. Did you expect that would happen, and is it unique for City to be so tied in with art? And the final part of this question is that going to be something that is always a thread through the club, like soccer and art?
I actually think they're much greater friends than perhaps one might imagine. They both are culture making, and they both bring enormous emotional responses, whether that's good or bad. And they kind of create fandom and passion. And so I hope that it really is always something that is really a part of City's DNA. I mean, we've commissioned at least 5 or 6 artists to do stuff and bring things to life in City Park.
And beyond, when you think about Market Park.
Absolutely,
Javen.
and beyond. Yeah, you're right. That's a great point. So in the city, in the community, because I think that soccer is very much something that defines how people celebrate and have kind of fun and energy and identify with, but art similarly, and artists. And so I feel like they actually make great bedfellows.
Has it given you pride that in this stadium on game day, we didn't know what to expect with 22,000 new friends all meeting each other for the first time? But if there was an advertising insight that I would take, is that fans see City Park as a platform for creativity. We see some crazy stuff happening.
Absolutely.
And each week there's something new, whether it's tifos, whether it's signs, whether it's how people come dressed. Do you see that as a point of pride that St. Louis feels comfortable to show up however they want and express their love for this new club? Does that...
I mean, Pete, I find it very difficult to truly articulate how profound of an idea City SC is. I mean, you go back to that quote at the beginning about what's more powerful than all the armies in the world, an idea whose time has come. I've said that to Bradley, Carnell, and his footballers too. Like, there is something so cool about how we have been embraced because St. Louis thinks it's theirs, because it is. I mean, that's what the Taylor family did it for. And when you think about some of the meaningfulness behind a placemaking destination that can be a platform for convening either families or festivals or concerts, as we're doing, launching an arts triennial, having a permanent public art sculpture that is commemorating a neighborhood. There is so much richness and so much sort of culture happening here that how can it not create hopefulness and inspire more of it around? So I think it's it is a platform, and it is about connecting to the community.
So just to sort of like wrap all of this, in and around the leadership halls, St. Louis City SC, people have always reiterated Taylor family's in this to win. But winning is more than just on the pitch, and Bradley and Lutz and John Hackworth are doing when the players are doing a fantastic job there at the moment. What does winning look like off the pitch? Because it feels like it's going well so far this year, but some people might say you're gonna always invest this love and this energy into this space. Like what sort of guarantees from an ownership level can you give this isn't just a one season wonder, this is here to stay?
Yeah, I mean, I think the some of what I think you're alluding to is that there is a very moment by moment experience of the actual matches themselves, and it has been a spectacular way to have launched us, because we had been talking about this thing for a few years now, and now we finally know what it is. And while we are learning, the players have just been sensational. But winning an individual match is a little fleeting, right? And we obviously hope we will always win, but we have learned that you can't always win all the time. the most important thing for us is that there is an identity here that really is demonstrable and representative of who we are as St. Louisans. And I think this is about a tribe that is completely inclusive and diverse and worldly, and we have an ambition to be heard globally. And so, I think that's being able to be celebrated for some of the community things that we're doing, as well as some of the record-breaking elements that we've had as a community when it comes to ticket sales, or when it comes to merch sales, or when it comes to being one of the first stadiums in America to have an entirely local culinarian experience, what we call our food story. These things are the sorts of things that live, I think, much, much further, including investment in technology too. I mean, we haven't really spoken much about tech, but we're one of the first of the new breeds of stadium builds, and that's happening in St. Louis in 2023. I mean, that's something to be really, really proud of, as opposed to we could have been one of the best of the last, and that was not interesting to us at all. So there's a lot of intentionality here, and the intentionality is something that's about legacy, far further than a game on Saturday.
You talk about development globally. Everything seems to be going well here from the outside looking in. You've added a president, Diego Gigliani, coming over from Manchester City Group. What inspired that move? Like, everything looks fine. Like, how does that come about?
Yeah, I mean, that's super exciting. I mean, just think we've got a Bundesliga sporting director, and now we're going to have an English Premier League president and general manager that sort of sits over all of the departments across the whole of St. Louis City SC. I think the thing that's so exciting about that is, first of all, he is just a special guy, and we're gonna, can't wait to introduce him to St. Louis and his family. They've been here, they've fallen in love with the place, they're excited. But I mean, really specifically for Carolyn, and you think about the amount of things that she is being pulled in multiple directions all the time. This gives her the opportunity, which is something she said, that she can concentrate on so many other things that are going to be so important to the success of City SC globally, whether it's strategic imperatives that the MLS are thinking about heading towards World Cup, or whether it's the community efforts with her board roles and things like that. Jason and I think very similarly that we want to be able to ensure that the more than soccer bit is the thing that really resonates. And then we've got someone like Diego that can really anchor a startup now becoming an operationally organized business going concern. So that I think it's going to be fun to have him in town.
Growing up, my mother always said, no talking about soccer at the dinner table. I'd imagine that now that's not the view in your house. How much fun has it been for you, Chrissy, and your daughters to be part of something like this? And do you talk about soccer at the dinner table?
Yeah, we do. It's funny because we're going to Dallas on Saturday to see us, and the girls, one's coming and the other has got stuff going on. It's really great. I mean, again, it sort of feels a little bit surreal for them. And it was a wonderful moment when at the opening day they got to walk out on the pitch and hear the kind of appreciation that St. Louis has for what the family's done. Chrissy has always been unbelievably patient with me because Saturday and Sunday mornings from about 6 a.m. to about noon is the English Premier League. Now it's that plus Saturday nights. So I'm in heaven.
Fantastic. And to close out, I wondered if you had a message for the fans of St. Louis and what should they be excited about moving forward?
Well, I think first of all, thank you. The unprecedented support and passion that they are putting into the club is just unbelievable, and we're so thankful. And America is listening and watching. So that's the first thing. The second thing, I think, is let's keep organizing ourselves as a community. Let's keep looking for ways in which we can ensure that the sum of our parts ladder up to this greater whole that then we can project to America to show that the perception here is that this is a happening place. This is, a huge arts and culture city, loads of music and art history, lots of extraordinary institutions here that showcase that historically. And then I think maybe the last thing is that we should really have a very organized conversation about what we want our futures to look like. And I'm very passionate about that. I think that the idea of working for where we want to go is super important, and that is what St. Louis can project to America.
Well, Lee, that was a very inspiring talk. I've learned a lot chatting to you. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. Thank you for joining.
Thank you, Pete.
And if you are listening to this podcast, give us a 5-star review. Say something nice about Lee so he'll come back in the future. And once again, City fans, thank you for listening. We're going to be back next week with more podcasts.